Welcome to the Born for Greatness podcast. Today, I have a very special guest, my friend Dylan Slattery. He is a two-time cancer survivor. Thank you, Dylan, for joining me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Excited for it. And I love the title of your show, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. I truly believe it. I think that we all are. And I've always always been my little saying. So I figured, hey, why not title the podcast that? So
Love it. Yeah.
yeah.
If you're going to make a podcast, it might as well define you and what you live by. So
that is so true. Such a good point. So let's dive right into it because I have 1,000 questions, but let's get started on your story and you had mentioned earlier, you were diagnosed with cancer when you were in your early 20s, correct?
Yeah. Yep. 22 the first time.
Okay. So you are cancer-free now though.
I am. So with melanoma, they use the term no evidence of disease or NED is what it's commonly referred to. So yeah, I've been in no evidence of disease state since coming up on 6 years now.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So tell me a little bit about your journey. How did you, because from what I know of you, you're pretty positive. How did you kind of get through a repetitive diagnosis like that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it goes much further back than that. From before I was even born, you talk about born for greatness. There was a level of adversity that I've faced from before I was even born. So my dad passed away a month before I was born. Unfortunately, he made the decision to take his own life. And that was when my mom was 8 months pregnant with me. And yeah, so, growing up, family was a huge thing. My mom, I'm super close with because in a lot of ways, even though I'm the oldest of 4 boys now, she went on to be married when I was 2. There's a picture of me walking her down the aisle when I was 2 years and 3 days old.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so in some ways I'm like an only child because I'm all that my mom has left of my dad, and I'm the only child that she had with him. And then and I'm the oldest, so I was naturally born kind of a leader. My brothers have always looked up to me and in a lot of ways. So growing up, she was the youngest of 12. So me and my brothers are one of 41 grandkids on her side of the family.
Oh my gosh.
Very small town, German Catholic dairy farming family. And so if you couldn't hire the help, you just procreated and created the help around the farm. And so yeah, family was a huge thing growing up. We would have 120 people at Thanksgiving and Christmas every year. And so super tight knit, small town Iowa community where everybody knew everybody. And so me and my 3 younger brothers, we were all in Scouts. We're all Eagle Scouts, which is a huge honor from a leadership perspective, and played a lot of sports growing up too, where had to work together as a team, overcome adversity on the field, coexist with teammates that you didn't always see eye to eye with. And then, yeah, so I didn't face a ton of adversity growing up. And when I got to school, it was one of those things where I was on a path, but it never felt like my path. It was a path that was, pressure from certain people in my life that I felt like I was supposed to do one thing or one of a few things. So my path where I went to school to either be a teacher and a coach, like my baseball coach, who I looked up to and adored, still do, and or I was going to go into business and pursue a career in perhaps banking or finance. I studied economics, and that's more of the path that my mom took as a now CFO of a bank in Iowa. And so those were kind of the 2 journeys. But as I got deeper and deeper into my studies, especially spent some time in the classroom doing student teaching, I knew that it wasn't for me. And I had a hard time being I like to say now I'm a recovering people pleaser. And one of the things that cancer does for you is people often refer to it as like the cancer card, playing the cancer card. And so
Yep.
interestingly enough, cancer helped me overcome being a people pleaser, in that if I was not feeling up to it during treatments to see people, or, obliged to obligations where
Mm-hmm.
I used to always say yes, I started to assess, what it is, what my internal compass was directing me towards, and also what I actually wanted to say yes to. So many things in life we feel pressured to say yes, but ultimately we are and our life is made up of what we are willing to say no to. So
So
that was
true.
probably one of the biggest lessons that came out of my childhood growing up, where I was a people pleaser, and
Mm.
what cancer did for me through that journey.
That is so interesting. I feel like, I mean, I've never heard anybody say anything like that out of any, type of cancer journey. So that is very interesting. What a positive thing that came out of that.
It wasn't always easy. I mean, there's certain times where I physically just couldn't. But even
Right.
there, it's just coming to grips with like being okay with saying no.
Yeah. So who was like your support and your rock through that time? Was it your mom, or did you have your whole family?
Um, Definitely my mom. She slept in a windowsill for 4 weeks in the hospital when I was
Mm,
in the ICU. So my treatments were pretty intense. I spent 4 weeks in and out of the ICU. So I do a week of treatments where I do a round of immunotherapy,
mm-hmm.
where so everything I did was immunotherapy. I didn't do any traditional chemo or radiation like a lot of
Okay.
cancer patients do. Um, Fortunately, I had a friend of mine in high school that was diagnosed with melanoma, the exact same thing that I had, when he was in his first or second year of college, and he passed away within 2 months of the diagnosis, because stage 4 melanoma is super aggressive. Typically, it starts at the skin, and once it gets through the 4 layers of your skin, it
Mm-hmm.
gets into your lymphatic system. From your lymphatic system, it traditionally or typically goes to your liver and your lung, then to your spine, up your spine, and into your brain. So when I was diagnosed the
Wow.
second time, about the only good news that they had for me was that it hadn't spread to my brain yet. So that's when they told me that I had less than 10% chance of survival.
Oh my gosh. Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, stage 4
Wow.
melanoma is bad news. And even today, the 5-year survival rate on stage 4 melanoma is under 15%.
Wow. I mean, that's amazing. That is
Yeah.
amazing. So what do you attribute? Is there anything specific that you attribute the success of recovery to?
That's a hard thing to answer. I've spent a lot of time in the cancer communities, and it's
Mm-hmm.
always a hard or a fine line where it's like, at the end of the day, it's a lot of luck. I'm very lucky and fortunate, and I'm not going to sit here and say that because I did one thing that it
Right.
allowed me to survive, because so many others have done the exact same things and not had the fortune that I have had. And it's a heartbreaking reality at the end of the day that cancer is something that exists in our world. But at the end of the day, it helps us appreciate what we have.
So
And
true.
to answer your question, family was a huge thing. Uh, my mom's brothers and sisters, cousins would help transport my brothers, to and from school, practice, all that, because my diagnosis didn't stop the world. My
Right.
people still have to work. My brothers still had to go to school. And so really having that support system behind you, uh, I didn't feel like I was alone. And I think that's something that not a lot of people have, especially
So
coming out
true.
of COVID. I think one of the biggest things COVID did was just magnify how alone we can feel sometimes when we're confined to our living space and can't leave our house and things like that. Relationships are what life is all about. And if you don't have them to lean on in a time when you're fighting for your life, it can make it feel very lonely.
Wow. Yeah, I can only imagine. Now, how old were you when you had your first diagnosis?
Yeah, so I was in my last semester of college. So
Wow.
I had a doctor's appointment a few years before my initial diagnosis where I had this mole on my neck that my mom was super concerned about. Me
Hmm.
being red hair and a lot of freckles,
Right.
and early 20s is just like, oh, it's just a mole, mom, like knock it
Right.
off. So I went to the primary care doc and he told me that it was just a mole. And so that was kind of like it settled it for me. And then
Mm,
her and I are very close, and she stayed on me, and she's like, that thing's changing and it looks not good, and you should really get it checked out again. And so I was in school, and it was just like, I don't have time for this. And so
right.
what ended up happening was she scheduled the appointment for me and was like, you're showing up and this is the time that you're going to be there. And so I
Oh,
went to
mom.
the ear, nose, and throat doctor at that point, and they took a biopsy and determined that it was melanoma. And so I actually got a call when I was in my Russian history and culture class from the provider, and I knew it wasn't probably good news. And so I
Mm.
didn't answer the phone call, called them back, and they had already scheduled the appointment for me the following Monday. So I knew it was more severe than they had originally anticipated. I went up to Mayo Clinic, had the surgery done, and so the scar is about 7 inches, runs down the side of my face to the middle of my neck. And they said that, yeah, the lymph nodes checked out clean. You're good to go. We sewed you back up, and you shouldn't have any other complications going forward. And then fast forward about 18 months, I woke up to go to a football game on a Saturday morning after being out with my friends the night before, having a good time. And I woke up with this golf ball sized lump right next to the scar. And so much so that I was slurring my words when I woke up because I couldn't open my mouth all the
Wow.
way. And so my friends were asking me what was going on, and I knew what was going on, but I didn't want to, spread the news or drive any sort of like panic amongst
Hmm.
the people that I was with that weekend. And so that's when I went up to Mayo Clinic the following week, and they did a bunch of different tests, stuck me with a bunch of different needles. I had probably the most painful thing of the whole experience was the liver biopsy, where they take like an epidural sized needle, shoved it into the side of my abdomen down into my liver, and it has this little tool that pops out and snips part of the tumor
Wow.
to test it. And that was the most painful experience. But yeah,
That sounds awful.
that's when they determined that I had tumors in my liver, lung, neck, and 3 tumors in my spine. And I did not have a great experience at Mayo, so I ended up getting a second opinion, because with the doctors at Mayo Clinic, they wouldn't address me as like a whole singular being. They're like, we could talk about these
Mm.
tumors, but we can't address these because we're not experts in this part of the body or whatever. And I was just like, is anybody gonna address me as one being?
Yeah.
And I just didn't really have a good vibe there. So I went and got a second opinion at the University of Iowa hospitals and clinics. And even though they presented the exact same treatment regimen,
Hmm.
um, the frame was completely different. So instead of saying like, this is an option, but your chances of surviving are less than 10% and it's not
Hmm.
looking good, um, they were like, this is our best shot and we're going to give it all we have. And so that was the sentiment from the oncologists all the way down to the nurses that were with me in the room all the time was, we're going to give it all we have and fight for all we have.
That's awesome. I mean, it just goes to show attitude and the way you present can make such a huge difference. And I'm sure had you stayed with the other people who didn't have this positive outlook or, some encouragement, you never know what the outcome could have been. So that's great that you went and got a second opinion. I think that's so important. Because look at you now. I mean,
Yeah, it's been a journey for sure. And that definitely wasn't the end of it. There were times early in the diagnosis after the stage 4, because all my friends were at that point 23, 24 years old, getting their first job, buying their first house. And so I wasn't always like this. I didn't always have a positive outlook on it. And there was a lot of, missing out of things, bachelor
right.
parties with my friends where I was in the hospital and couldn't go. And it got to a really deep and dark place where I was still in school at the time, and I had been drinking and just really frustrated. Like I said, felt like I was on a path that wasn't for me, and made some comments to some friends of mine that I felt like I needed to give up, and that it wasn't worth it. And fortunately, I'm surrounded by good friends, and they reached out to my mom, who they knew was the one person that could get through to me at that time. And so I woke up the next morning to my mom at my bedside saying, "Hey, what's going on? Why aren't you in class?" And at that point, I told her that I hadn't been to class in months, and I had gone from, having a 3.8 and on the honor roll and whatever, to just not understanding what my purpose was in life at all. And so I left school at that point, not knowing when I would be back with my diagnosis. Fortunately, I was double majoring, so I had enough credits I could just graduate on the spot with a liberal studies degree and a minor in econ rather than a major. And so I did that, and I just moved on at that point. So did treatments for the next off and on for the next 3 years. And yeah, that was the story. And interestingly enough, the same day that she came and got me was the I don't remember what it was, 24th anniversary of my dad committing suicide. So I didn't realize it, my friends didn't realize it, but it was at the top of my mom's mind. And so she went into a slight panic when she got that call, knowing that it was on the same day that my dad had taken his life, that many years before.
Wow. That's intense.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I am so glad that she came and got you. And now, I mean, you had a really good taste of what the healthcare system's like. So can you tell people what you do now and what you're working on?
Yeah. So, the path to where I'm at today is long. It feels like much longer than 6 years, but I didn't have my first full-time job till I was 27, which just kind of goes to show what those setbacks can do for somebody, especially at that time in their life. And it's often a forgotten like population in terms of cancer. We typically associate it with the University of Iowa is known for the children's hospital. At the end of the first quarter of all the football games at home, they wave to the kids in the hospital that are undergoing cancer treatments and things like that. So there's pediatrics hospitals, and then usually it's the older people that get diagnosed, and there's not a lot of in between. So there is no adolescent, young adult cancer, facilities, and it is pretty isolating. And so I spent some time in the cancer communities after that, got into motivational speaking. I was working at a bank in the 401k retirement space because that's what I had studied. It's what I knew and was good at just naturally. But again, just felt like there was more, to your point, born for greatness. And it's I just had that continued calling and itch to find more. So I explored motivational speaking. Fortunately, I got to share the stage with some pretty cool people at different points, spoke to some college sports teams, and created some opportunities that most people just don't have the opportunity to do. And it was because I was able to connect with that young population of, hey, you're overcoming adversity every day on the field, every day in the weight room, every day in practice, and the fight is worth it. Keep grinding, keep hustling. Then COVID happened. There were no more live events, and so I had to pivot one more time. And so I got into sales, did some stuff in that space, realized that I was pretty good at it, which, you know, just another point of like, how do you identify what you're good at and what you're great at? And, you know, understanding how anyone can be born for greatness. We all have greatness in us. We just have to go out and try things and know that we might not be the best at it the first time around. I still have video of the first speech that I ever did, and I just cringe now when I watch it.
Oh, I get that.
But you know, none of us are finished products. Nobody has it all figured out. And I found that just being vulnerable with people gave them hope and showed them that you don't have to have it all figured out, and we don't have to be perfect. Going back to the people pleasing, a lot of it derives from feeling like we have to be perfect always, and there's no room for any failure. But at the end of the day, it's the failures or when we go back and look at the tape of our life, identify those gaps where we can improve, put in the work. And, you know, somebody like me who had never done any sort of public speaking could be on the same stage as Katie Couric and Jim Kelly, who's a Hall of Famer for the Bills. Like, that's awesome. It's possible. We just have to put ourselves out there in order to create the opportunity, refine our ability. And so, I got to a point in my speaking career too, where it was just like, this is not the end of the story. Like, everybody would always tell me like, oh, you've been through so much and this and that. And it was just like, yeah, but there's more. I can do more. And so the opportunity that I have now, fortunately, it was complete happenstance. I met my business partner, Mike, in 2018 when I moved out to Colorado. So in between it all, we vacationed out to Colorado growing up quite frequently. It was about as far west as we could go in the van, because we didn't have a ton of money growing up, where we could fly a family of 6 across the country. And so Colorado was about as far west as we could make it without a full-on wrestling brawl happening in the back of the van. So I fell in love with,
I'm sure.
I fell in love with Estes Park, and I was just like, you know what, when I grow up, I'm going to move to Colorado. So I tried to move out to Colorado in 2015 in between my two cancer treatments. And the first scan out there showed that the tumors in my liver were starting to grow again. So I had to move back home to Iowa after only 2 months, did more treatments for another 1.5 years, and then moved back out to Colorado in 2018. And you know, I was bootstrapping it. I was umpiring baseball games and doing motivational speaking, and one opportunity opened up in sales, and that kind of led one thing to another. I was at a networking event and bumped shoulders with Mike, and that's how we met. And we were friends first. He got me a job in the health insurance space, and between that, I used him as a resource to just ask the stupid questions that I didn't want to ask the people that I was calling on and trying to sell to every day. So I refined that message, got a really good understanding of the market, and identified an opportunity that we could move into. And so after 2 years there, we made the leap and decided to make it official. And so we rolled out our health plan the beginning of this year. And it's been growing very rapidly. And I think a big part of that is like Mike brings his expertise on the benefit consultant side, having worked in his mom's primary care office and understanding the X's and O's of what it's like on the provider side and the benefit consultant side. And then you have me, who's seen the best and the worst of healthcare, right? Like at the height of it, my single year record is $1.5 million in claims. for all of my cancer treatments, and that was just 1 year. And so understanding that there's a financial aspect to it, there's a mental aspect to it of the additional stress, which obviously money has a huge part in that. If you can't afford your treatments, and not everybody, not many people can. I think now the statistics say like 1 in 5 adults have some sort of medical debt attached to their name. And so it's like there has to be a better way to build and revise the system that we know it today. And on top of that, I'm from a small town in Iowa where most employers, they don't have hundreds or thousands of employees. And so it's like, how do we make the healthcare experience good for the patient, affordable for the patient, and then also affordable for the employers that have to foot the large majority of the bill more often than not, to provide that level of care to their employees if and when they need it. So that's kind of how I ended up where I'm at right now.
Wow, that's awesome. So what would you say to somebody who is facing adversity in their life and really struggling and feeling hopeless? Is there something in particular that you can instill into someone?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, again, goes back to the isolation piece. So if you don't have access to family and friends, there are communities out there where what you're experiencing, chances are there's 1,000 or thousands of other people that are going through exactly what you're going through or something very similar as you right now. The danger in that is there's a lot of toxicity there too. There's like I endured at a point in my journey, there's bitterness, there's anger, there's all the emotions that come with it. But just to understand that you're not alone goes a long way. And then finding that that small circle. We don't need, in a world where we're defined by the thousands of followers that we have on Instagram or Facebook or whatever.
So true.
It's those, who are those 4 or 5 ride or dies, and surround yourself with those people, and you're going to go places.
That's great. That's awesome. I mean, you have such an incredible story, and I just love it. I love your outlook and how you go about it, and realize that you are born for greatness, and you've taken something that's awful and terrible and should never happen to anyone, and you've turned it into something. I mean, you've gone and spoken and just, I'm sure, helped many people who are going through tough times, to know that there is hope, because there's always hope, and you're a living, walking example of having hope. So I love it.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, like it's always the smallest moments, the things that, like, unless you have your head up, and this is one thing I'd say too, is like burying your head in your phone all day long is the worst place that you can be if you're enduring adversity, because you're looking at everyone else's highlight reels, and it just makes it feel like you're so much further away from success or greatness than you actually probably are. We're just a few small moments. One person crossing paths with can change your entire life trajectory. But if your head's down and buried in your phone, we don't see the opportunities. And so it's like there's opportunities in front of us all the time, and you can be proactive and go out and create them, but you also have to be open to it, and be willing to pivot and say, what I've been doing to this point isn't working or isn't optimal, and there's ways that I can change it. And I think that's the other benefit too of surrounding yourself with, that small cohort of people who have your best interest in mind, is you get different perspectives of like, hey, you're super talented at this. Why don't you look into this, or try this, come to this event, whatever the case may be. And then all of a sudden, you it's hard for us to see the frame when we're in the picture, and we have this identity in mind of who we are, but in one small moment we can change what that identity is going to look like forever. We're not defined by our past. We're not defined by what our parents did or didn't do. And at any given moment, I always tell people, like, when I was sharing my story, it's like, take back the pen. You own the pen of your own story. Don't give it to anybody else, because at the end of the day, we only have one life. So
yeah,
write our own story, because that's at the end of the day, if you're not happy with the story that's being written, chances are it's because someone else is holding the pen.
wow, wow, that was really good. What a way to like visualize and think of it. That's awesome. You are so inspirational, and thank you so much for joining me today. It has been awesome. So I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Anything, anytime. And feel free, if you're listening to this and feel like you're in a funk or whatever, feel free to reach out. Rebecca's been a huge resource in my life, more recent than not. And it's one of those things where it's like, surround yourself with greatness and you will become great. It's kind of a cliche, but it's, the surround yourself with 5 people and you'll be the average of them. We control who we're around. So that's just one more way where you can take back that pen. So I'm grateful that you're in my circle and helping me refine and born into even greater greatness.
Well, I feel the same way about you. So again, thank you for joining me. And if you have any questions, or like Dylan said, you are in a spot where you are struggling, make sure to reach out, because there are people who care. Even if you may not know them, just reach out, because there really truly are. So thank you. And